It's Stephanie again. So in my previous video, I was talking about how my husband was out of work on an injury. If you haven't seen this video, then go check it out because then you'll know where I've been. So, as I explained, we have to restart baby step number 1 for the Dave Ramsey plan for getting out of debt. So what I want to do is kind of update you as far as like how much we owe and everything. So list of all of our debts, and as of now our balance is $43,438.34. Some of the medical we need to dispute, we need to call the hospital and everything, the insurance, because we got billed, and because we're still getting caught up from when my husband was out of work. Things have not had a chance to get paid yet, so unfortunately they're like about to send us to collections because I haven't been able to pay like anything. So like I said in my last video, we're going to be doing a no spend October because we're recalculating our income. So a lot has been happening, like I said in the last video. So what has also changed is that I left my full-time job. I got 2 jobs actually. In July I got a second job, and I did that consistently through the beginning of this month. And I got another job to replace it, and I am crunching really hard at one job, still waiting on some shifts and everything at the other job for my availability that I've given them. I'm a CNA, which is a certified nursing assistant, for those of you who do not know. I work in home health care. I left the long-term care facility, which is also known as skilled nursing. Some people refer to it as a nursing home, and that was my full-time job. But I have full-time hours doing the home health, and I'm just going to be going like back and forth between 2 jobs. I'm trying to maintain at least 1 day off a week and working as much as I can, accepting hours whenever they come to me. And so yeah, that happened. And then so this is also, I guess, part of the reason why I haven't done any update videos is because during this time, with my husband being out of work and injured, we were having car problems with my car. In March, before he got hurt, I was in a car accident, and I was in the car that I owned. No payments. I've owned it for a while, and the insurance totaled it. So it was considered a salvage, meaning that the repairs were more than the valuation. So at the time, we kind of discussed whether or not to get a new vehicle. And at the time it was no, because it was cosmetic damage. And so I cashed out and accepted, let's see, what was it, the car accident? I accepted from the other insurance $300 for missing wages, and then I had to go through my insurance and did a no coverage because there was some problems with the other person's coverage. At the time I was on my way to work, so unfortunately I was stupid and didn't call the police. I would never recommend that if I'm ever in a car accident again. I don't care if I have to miss work or I'm late or something, I'm going to call the police because it would have gone so much smoother. But I cashed out using my my own policy for the other person not being insured at $2,163.29. So between the 2 of them, that was almost $2,500. So at that point, I had completely furnished baby step number 1 and then paid off a bunch of stuff. And including what I had to fix was my headlight in my vehicle to make it where it was street legal again, because I didn't have a right headlight for probably 2.5 weeks while I was waiting on insurance and then the part to come in. And during that time I got pulled over twice. That was not fun, but the cops understood that I had been in an accident and I was waiting on things to get settled. I did eventually get a check for my insurance about a month ago for $250, meaning that they did find out that the other person did have coverage, but the reason why I settled was so I could get it funded at the time instead of having to take this lengthy process and wait, because otherwise it would have taken like 3 months to get paid. But I I ended up paying like $160 to make my car street legal. So at the time, we had decided that getting a car wasn't an option, that we would just deal with it. Also at that time, my car was already having problems, and I knew of the problems that needed to get done, and we were talking about it. Well, through the summer, and with my husband being out of work, I was primarily using his car, which we are making payments on. We have, as of now, let's see, $3,300 left to pay on his vehicle, and we got it a couple years ago, so it should be paid off in about like 8 months, I'm hoping. Well, it'll be 9 months or whatever. If it doesn't, it'll be paid off probably by April. So I was primarily using his car, but there was a couple times where when I took my car, I was continuing to break down, and we had gone up to Idaho City, which is up in the mountains, where in the area we live in Idaho, in Nampa, right outside of Boise, and his parents live in Idaho City. Well, his car was starting to have problems, so we had his car go into the shop, and there was some like computerized problems and stuff with his transmission or something, and it had already been fixed a couple years ago, but we didn't have to pay anything. They got it fixed and everything. I assumed that they messed up when they fixed it originally a couple years ago. Thankfully, we were still under a warranty, so we didn't have to pay anything out of pocket at all. But at that time that his vehicle was in the shop, mine, like, I was completely dead in the water. And I was able to take it to a shop, and I paid like $140 to have the full diagnostic, because I went in knowing, 3 of the problems that my car had that I already knew about, and I was explaining what was going on in the car, and I was like, listen, these are the things that I already know need to be fixed in the car. I need a full diagnostic because I need to know if there's other things that are wrong with the vehicle. And that took like 2 days. So there was a period of 4 days where we didn't have a vehicle at all, and my husband had just gone back to work doing part-time hours. So we were making it so we could have the one vehicle while he was doing part-time shifts and like get me to work on time, because we have completely different shifts. I mean, we both work nights, but they're like overlapping, and he works like 15 miles that way, and I worked like 4 miles that way and everything, and they overlapped. So we ended up having to borrow my mom's car for a couple days so we could both get to work. And so at that point we started talking about like what we're going to do to move forward, because honestly, with the fact that I was in the car accident earlier in the year and it was considered salvaged, it was totaled, that meant that what had already happened was more than it would be for the value of my car. And at that point, I'm like, well, even if I wanted to sell my car, I'm not going to get anything for it because it's a salvage. And it was already worth, like, maybe, when I cashed out for the accident, it was just barely over $2,000. And they totaled it because they said that was more than the valuation. So with the fact that the valuation was already so low and it was totaled, I wasn't going to get anything from it. And I looked at my husband and I'm like, we would need to put at least $2,500 into the car to fix it, to have no more problems. And so we were kind of talking about just the fact that with it being salvaged, what are we going to do to move forward? And we had talked about it off and on for quite a few days, because at this point we were both tired of putting money into a vehicle. Yes, I owned the vehicle, so that was a plus. There was no car payments or anything. I owned the vehicle. But I was constantly breaking down, and it's probably happened in the last year like at least 8 times that I've just been stuck, and my car wasn't starting, or when I had the diagnostic, it was like I was losing power as I was driving, and the diagnostic came back with like nothing additional than what I already knew. And I still think that there was something else wrong, because part of the problem was my radiator or the radiator fan, because it involved like air conditioning and overheating and stuff, and I wasn't even overheating the day that I broke down. That was the final straw. of the situations. So we talked about it for a few days, and the fact that my husband was just barely getting back to work. We had used the emergency fund. At that point, there was so many overdraft fees because it was on my income alone, and my income alone does not even cover the minimums for our base monthly expenses. And so we were just like, okay, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And this is kind of where it comes into play of, I already know that for one, it's a Dave Ramsey no-no. So you can sit there and put in the comments that you disagree and it's not following the baby steps, and that's true. It's not following his baby steps. It's like a huge Dave Ramsey no-no. Like, no, 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 no. Across the board, no, no. My husband and I are already aware of that. Everyone's circumstance is different, and that's why I'm putting it out there, is because I'm finally ready to talk about it and explain that at this point, I don't really care, because we did what we have to do for our family and moving forward to get out of debt. So what we decided was to replace my vehicle. And we had looked online and kind of was interested in a couple of vehicles. We went out one day on my day off and his day off because he had just gone back to work, and we were looking at vehicles. Well, a couple of them kind of was okay and stuff. We weren't really sure. Have in mind, we had no money for a down payment except for my car, which who the heck knows what I was going to get for a trade-in because the valuation in it being salvaged. So we had no idea. We didn't know what we could qualify for, so yes, we needed to do financing, which, again, no taking out more debt when you're doing the Dave Ramsey stuff. So I'm well aware of this already. And so we were just kind of talking about it, and we're like, well, you know, let's say I find a vehicle and it's at the top end of what we thought was our budget, like maybe $8,000 and stuff, because the car I had was I paid $3,500 for it at the time, 4 years ago. But our credit a few years ago was bad, and before Dave Ramsey, we were really working towards building our credit up because of buying a house. Now, all I really care about is getting things paid off, because I'm well aware now that you can do manual underwriting to get a mortgage, and you don't need a credit score. But when we got his car, like, the payments are outrageous because of the credit we had at the time, but it's almost paid off, so there's no sense in like doing any type of refinancing for it because it will be paid off in less than a year. So we were kind of looking around, and he ended up going home, and I was continuing to look, and I went over to my mom's and was talking to her neighbor, and we went to a couple dealerships and didn't really see anything that, one, I liked, or two, what we thought was in our price range. We were wanting to get a used vehicle around $8,000. My dream would be to have a crossover that's also a manual transmission, which was, for one, really hard to find. So I knew that if I was going to settle, I was either going to get a car that was a manual transmission or a crossover that was an automatic. And I ended up deciding that I would just try to find a car with good gas mileage that was a manual transmission. Cannot talk. I'm sorry, guys. And I'm sorry about the lighting. There's overcast today. But, so my mom's neighbor knew a guy at the Dennis Dillon Nissan dealership, and we kind of went in, and I was saying, like, hey, I kind of want to see if you guys have any used inventory. My price range is about $8,000, but in all honesty, we have no idea what we can qualify for. And so he then showed me a 2016 Nissan Versa. It brand new, and it was listed at $10,009. So, you know, basically $11,000. And he's like, it's, you know, obviously at the top end of your budget, it's a couple thousand over your budget, but let's take a test drive and see if you even like the car, and then talk to your husband. And so we did a test drive. I really liked the vehicle, and so I called my husband, and I was like, hey, this is where we're at, this is the car I test drove, you know, what do you want me to do? And he's like, go ahead and do a credit check to see if we could even get financing, because at this point, we still have no idea if we could even qualify, because the last time was like 2.5 years ago when we got his car, and I mean, at that point, that was also a huge need, because his car was barely moving, and had to like stop every half mile during the winter to wipe off his thing, because he didn't have heat or air conditioning. So the windows were constantly like freezing over in the winter, so that was a need. So we did what we had to do back then. But I was waiting there at the dealership with my mom's neighbor, and the guy came back and said that we qualified. There was a couple different people coming in with offers, but he's like, do you bank with such and such? And I was like, yeah. And he said, this is what they're coming at, and it's the lowest interest rate, which is 6.9%, which, you know, the conditions was that at the time we were overdrafted, and so they said that they would do the financing at that rate at 6.9, and then they would accept my car as a trade-in with no money down. No money down. So at this point, my husband and I were talking, we're like, okay, well, you know, we have to do what we have to do, and because we didn't want to worry about car expenses and everything, like other than regular maintenance, getting like the oil changed and, you know, the brakes checked and the tires rotated and stuff, with the warranty on the vehicle, we really shouldn't have to worry about like if the engine goes out. And if something happens with the engine, it's under the warranty. In fact, the warranty says that we don't even have to pay out of pocket for the fix if something goes wrong with the vehicle. So our credit union, that's who we bank through, our credit union qualified us for the vehicle at 6.9% interest with only our car down, which because it was a salvage, they took $200, so no cash down. And our first payment was like 6 weeks after the fact. And so I called my husband and I was like, hey, this is the last car on the lot for this year. It was the absolute base model, so I don't have the screen in the vehicle. I don't even have cruise control. I have like handle, like main power or non-power, like just the regular crank windows. I don't have power locks. I have the base bare minimum model. Now if you wanted like the fancy radio stuff and the screen and like GPS and everything, it starts going up, but we just wanted the base model, and we made the decision to move forward. So I called my husband and he came down, we signed the paperwork. The agreement with the credit union was that we could not pick up the car until we were out of overdraft. Well, I was going to get paid a couple days later, and so that would take us out of overdraft, and so that's what we did. So as of now, we have a new debt added on top of, it's, I want to say, with adding his physical therapy that we're making payments on, and like the emergency room and like stuff with that, on top of the vehicle that we've added into our debt, there's about $2,000 worth of medical from the time that when he was injured. And health insurance is a plus, because if we hadn't had health insurance, we would be like, that would be like $15,000 worth of debt added on to it, just in medical expenses. And so $2,000 is pretty good when you're thinking about it. I saw all of the statements from the health insurance and what they were covering and what we owed, and I was like, holy crap, if we didn't have coverage, this would really suck. This would break us. And so we know that, for one, Dave Ramsey says never buy a new vehicle, and if you're going to buy a vehicle, save up and buy cash. Well, unfortunately, that wasn't an option, and we understand that. But like, I'm here telling our story because yes, we have to go back down to baby step number one. We're in the process of refunding it now that he's back to work, and I'm getting, you know, full-time hours, and we have steady income, and he's working overtime. But we're also adding the car to our debt snowball. It's now going to be the last one on it, but it is still included in our debt snowball. And now that I have the both of our vehicles are now completely, like, there's nothing wrong with the vehicles. I don't have to worry about not being able to take a shift because my car won't start and I can't leave my apartment, or not making it to work because I'm on the freeway and my car just dies and I have to call and say, well, I can't come to work. I can take the shifts. And like, before we decided to get the vehicle, we were talking about like carpooling, and if we could make it as a one car household, and we didn't have to get another vehicle. And realistically, like, we kind of could have done the carpooling and stuff, but how long was it going to take us to even get a couple thousand to put for, like, if we were to buy a car outright? It'd probably take us, with replenishing the baby step number one and then having the money to fund another vehicle, we were probably looking at maybe another like year because you have to also be paying on your baby step number 2. And so we were just kind of like, he did have it arranged where he could have carpooled with one of his coworkers, but realistically, is a coworker gonna help carpool for like a year? Like, probably not. And with me being in healthcare, being a CNA, and going and covering these shifts, I have to be able to go. And if he is 15 miles that way into the other town for work, and I'm here, and someone wants me to work a shift and there's no car, then what am I supposed to do? So I understand that there's probably going to be some negative comments about our decision, but I just want other people to know that circumstances are different, and this is ours, and we're aware that it's not the Dave Ramsey way, but it doesn't mean that we're not doing the program. Like, we're still starting over and doing our baby step number 1. We're doing the no spend October. We are, recalculating everything, and we're, going to be gazelle intense. That's why I have 2 jobs and everything, because I knew that if we were going to do this, that we had to do what we have to do to get these things paid off. And even with adding the car, we are still possible to be out of debt in 3 years. And so, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, hit the like button if you like, leave me a friendly comment down below. And if you don't like what I have to say, I'm sorry, but have a good day, and don't forget, live like no one else.